All right, so let's now rope in energy expert Chris Yelland to discuss this further. Chris, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. So just speak to us about what your understanding is of this particular unplanned, non-technical shutdown at Unit 2.
Yeah, it clearly was a mistake. It shouldn't have shut down, and any loss of 900 megawatts of power generation capacity at a time when Eskom's generation capacity is under pressure and when we are running reasonably close to load shedding, as we were last week, is deeply regrettable, I'm sure. This kind of mistake should not happen. And it has left the Western Cape with no power from Koeberg's Nuclear Power Station, for at least 48 hours, according to Eskom's communication. Now, the problem, of course, is twofold. Firstly, to be without 1,800 megawatts of power from a so-called baseload reliable power plant presents additional burden on the remainder of Eskom's plant and brings us, 2 stages closer to load shedding. So that is a problem in itself. But there's another aspect to this, and that is when the whole of Koeberg trips, the power system stability in the Western Cape becomes more vulnerable. The risk of an unplanned regional blackout in the Western Cape increases when there is no large generation capacity operating in the Western Cape. Now, as this unit tripped out, leaving both units 1 and 2 offline, they immediately had to start up the Unplanned power plant and are running it heavily to provide the necessary inertia and stability of the national grid in the Western Cape. And it makes the Western Cape at the moment more vulnerable to a blackout, because if now, whilst these 2 units are down, there was to be a trip out of one of the main power lines bringing power from the north to the south, then there's every likelihood that there will be a regional blackout in the Western Cape, as there was in 2005, the last time that this sort of thing happened, where 2 units were down and then a power line tripped out, feeding power from Mpumalanga, caused a regional blackout. So it does add to the risk. We don't have a regional blackout now because there's no failures on these transmission lines, but if there was to be one, it presents a strong likelihood of regional blackout. It also results in additional costs of operating diesel. These Unplanned power plant uses vast amounts of diesel when running hard, and this unfortunately adds to the costs that Eskom has to face.
Yeah. And I mean, I want to come back to a term that they've also referenced in their statement, long-term operational program. But just on some of the things that you've just mentioned now, as you rightfully say, the utility says that the trip did not necessitate the implementation of load shedding, but does say the generation capacity remains constrained. Now, to that point, and to your comments that you've just made now around the vulnerabilities in the system, should they be implementing some sort of relief then across the country, whether it's in the Western Cape, for instance, or in the country, just to make sure that no major incidences happen?
Well, I'm sure they're doing everything possible because the risk has increased. They say that the generation capacity is constrained, and therefore the loss of 900 megawatts out of the blue unexpectedly, brings us closer to the edge. Of course, you don't want to go into load shedding until it's actually necessary, because there's a cost to the economy of load shedding. And it is actually, even though it is very expensive to run the open cycle gas turbines, it's even more costly to the economy if we run into load shedding. So they are doing everything possible, I guess, to avoid load shedding. But, depending on how long it takes to restore unit number 2, and they do say it's going to be about 48 hours. But again, this depletes the so-called emergency diesel reserves. And at a certain point, when you operate these open cycle gas turbines hard, Eskom runs out of diesel storage capacity at its power plants, and then they may have to embark on load shedding while they replenish the diesel stocks, as they sometimes do. For example, over a weekend, if they're running the diesel OCGTs hard, they need the weekend to replenish the diesel, and sometimes this results, in the need for load shedding. So I think they're trying not to do load shedding, but this brings load shedding closer, and it brings the risk of load shedding, it increases the risk of load shedding.
Yeah, and I mean, Eskom has had a good run in as far as no load shedding for the better part of 2024. Just going back to their long-term operation program, perhaps talk to us a little bit about what that entails. I mean, we do know, of course, that this particular incident happened during maintenance on Unit 1, which is currently offline, as part of that program.
Yeah, so this long-term operation program of Koeberg Power Station is intended to extend the operating life for a further 20 years beyond its current licensed operating life. And to extend the life and to get the regulator to extend the license, the operating license, they have to do a number of activities and upgrades to ensure the safety of the plant over the long term. The major work involved was the replacement of the steam generators. The steam generators are units. They don't actually generate electricity, they generate steam. And the steam then drives the turbines that produces the electricity. So these are actually large heat exchangers that reached the end of life and had to be replaced. Now, they have been replaced on both unit number 1 and unit number 2. And it took a 1-year outage on unit 1 and a further 1-year outage on unit 2 to replace these steam generators in more than double the time that was planned. Nevertheless, they have been replaced. But after having each of these units being down for a full year, Eskom has now had to switch off unit number 1 for another 6 months, hopefully not more. And this will then be followed by switching off unit number 2 for another 6 months in order to perform certain safety tests, in particular, what is known as the overpressure test of the containment building that surrounds the nuclear reactor. This building, this concrete structure, is intended to contain nuclear radiation in the very unlikely event of a meltdown or a serious malfunction of the reactor. And this is a requirement by the regulator to do this test every 10 years. And it has to do this test now. There have been some cracks in the containment building, the concrete and the reinforced steel, which has been corroding, and they have to do these tests to ensure that there is no unacceptable leakage of radiation in the event of a serious malfunction. So yes, further work being done, and this is causing these units to have to go down. And instead of having nuclear power with a very high availability factor, in fact, this is reducing the energy availability factor of Koeberg to less than 50%, which is really not good.
Yeah. Chris, well, thank you so much for that. Some positive news in the horizon, but not good at the moment. But thank you so much, energy expert Chris Yelland, there for us.